Well, joining me now is our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes. And Deborah, we're hearing more about the US operation to get its staff and their families out of the country. Just tell us more about that and indeed how the British operation is going to get staff out and also other British nationals like Rizan, whom we've just heard from.
Yes, so the US has said that they've evacuated just under 100 people from Sudan. That is all of the US nationals who work at the embassy and other US staff. They've left the local nationals in place to keep the embassy open. In terms of the actual operation, it's incredibly high risk. This is a very volatile situation on the ground. You've got two warring factions still fighting. There's no secure airfield to land. And the US said that they sent in a special operations team using Chinook helicopters. They flew from a base in Djibouti, which is a country close to Sudan, where the US has a large military base. The helicopters refueled in Ethiopia. They then, they refueled in another country, in Ethiopia. And then they landed in Sudan. They were only on the ground for an hour as these officials were put onto the helicopters and then removed from the country. The helicopters were not fired upon. That's clearly something that the planners of an operation like this would have to be taking into consideration. It was very high risk. They've managed to get out, but it really does underline the huge challenge facing all countries that have officials, diplomats in Sudan at the moment that they need to get out. Saudi Arabia and Jordan launched operations the day before to get their people out, and that included through the port in the east of the country, the Red Sea port. Again, there's no freedom of movement, and so for ordinary citizens like the person you've just heard from, it's incredibly difficult. They are being advised to stay in place. We understand that the UK does plan to evacuate its diplomats from Sudan as soon as feasible, but the government hasn't said how that's going to happen. They've said that the Foreign Office and the Ministry of Defence are working on a number of different contingencies. Of course, there's the possibility of launching their own mission, as the US have done, to get people out. They could do it in a coordinated way. They could also ask allies to help the British diplomats. But for the British nationals that are in the country, the advice remains to stay in a place of shelter. The UK does say that its top priority is to help those British nationals, but those words aren't going to be a huge amount of comfort for people that are unable to leave and at the moment don't seem to have a viable evacuation option being offered. But of course that could change because the situation remains incredibly volatile. And for the UK, it's clearly a high priority. The Prime Minister chaired his fourth Cobra emergency meeting yesterday morning on the crisis, which really does underline just how seriously it's being taken, but also, given the fact that there's been no movement so far, it would seem, just how difficult it is to be able to conduct operations in Sudan at the moment.